A process for connecting with lifelong learning is through work-based learning. And there's a question we can ask here, a very simple question, which is, well, what is work-based learning? The thing about work-based learning is that it incorporates a range of words and phrases to describe it. Things like CPD, or continuing professional development, things like vocational learning, things like workplace learning, lifelong learning, work-based learning. All these are words which are used to try to describe what work-based learning actually is. What we can see then is that everybody has a view on what work-based learning is, and all of these views can actually be quite different and mean different things. And so clearly there's a spectrum, a continuum that exists in terms of work-based learning. And this continuum can actually define different perspectives on what work-based learning actually is. It can actually be quite a narrow perspective, or in other words, it's about learning in the workplace, only in the workplace. And therefore, perhaps it's driven by the employers rather than the individual. But work-based learning could also have a very broad perspective, which is about learning which relates to our professional roles, relating to our work. And in this regard, work-based learning is very much driven by the individual or by community needs rather than organisational or employer needs. And as a spectrum, there is a sort of middle ground that we can consider. The middle ground where work-based learning is influenced by the needs of the students that we're working with, or perhaps by the system within which we're working. So work-based learning is very complex to understand, and it very much extends the skills and knowledge of the reflective practitioner and has the potential for extending the abilities of the teacher. And in terms of this extension, we can consider work-based learning within a matrix of components. And we can see that work-based learning can be individually driven, or it can be organisationally driven. Or in other words, is it the teacher learning in the workplace, or is it the teacher working from the workplace? And it can also be informal or formal in terms of its approach. And if we look at the components of this matrix, if workplace learning is individually driven and is informal, the processes here are very much about improving performance from a personal, individual perspective. And it could be about developing skills in a new work setting or within a new framework. From an individual formal perspective, it can be very much about investing in the process of learning, not only personally but also professionally, to extend performance within the work environment, within the organisation. From an organisational and formal perspective, it's very much about investing in learning to improve the organisation's overall performance. And certainly in the 21st century, it can also be about market competitiveness for the organisation. And then from an organisation and informal perspective, it's very much about investing in learning to bring knowledge and to bring skills to the organisation which are currently missing or deficient in some way. So we can see that workplace learning, this spectrum, its complexity, when viewed in a matrix form, actually helps define the type of learning that takes place, whether it's from an individual or an organisation perspective, or whether it's from an informal or a formal perspective.